Hello. Oh, there I am. Okay, we are live. You know, I thought the music would be at the right volume, but it's a little bit loud for me. There was a relaxing song before, and then went to an intense song. Got a little loud. Okay, so today it's gonna be a chill day because I've been sick all week, and so I have a frog in my throat, and I may take breaks now and again to clear out my nose. So we're going to get started here talking about the 5 ways. This is the final of the 5 ways. And we're going to once again overview the 5 ways, short just for a bit, and talk about how confidence fits into the other ones. Then we're going to get into the details, and we're going to talk about how this really works, and then how to actually implement it. Okay. Okay. Got my coffee here. I'm ready to go. All right. So we're going to start with explaining how confidence fits in to the larger picture. Now, in this series, I started with awareness, moved to intention, willpower, expectation, and then confidence. Now, under confidence, you can see that I have it split between confidence and positivity. And I describe it as this is the fuel and flavor that permeates all successful ventures into the unknown. And that is kind of it's part of the metaphor that I'm using, that if we are a ship on the ocean, kind of an exploration vibe idea to it, right? So this confidence or positivity is going to have an effect on every other aspect, maybe even more so than some of the other ways. For example, you can do little to no work on any of the others, but if you have this confidence and positivity and it just doesn't go away, it almost doesn't matter how much you work on the other ones. Something's going to work simply because of how the mindset works with lucid dreaming. If you're trying, if you're doing some kind of other skill, and you don't really care about the details, if you're just going out there and doing it with a great attitude and with a lot of effort, and every day you wake up, you enjoy it, you're being positive, you're just doing whatever feels right, and you're just having a good time. Are you min-maxing? Maybe not. Maybe you're not getting the absolute most out of every single aspect. But you don't really need to if you're just looking for a good experience and you're just enjoying the process. You don't really need to min-max to death. You don't need to get into the weeds of all this stuff and get into intention how does that work? How do I do it? Because if you're just chill basically, and you just go with the flow, um, you're gonna learn about it on your own. All this stuff. That's the thing about lucid dreaming is you're gonna learn about it on your own, and a lot of this is you kind of have to at the end of the day. You kind of have to learn about it on your own. Um, so, and you know, I realized that I didn't just make sure I'm live. Okay. So, um, that's I think I said in a previous video, you know, each one of these ways can be used by itself as its own approach. And what you'll find is that the people who stick around lucid dreaming for a long time, they stick with it and they get really good at it. They figured out one of these really works for them. Okay. And for the omnis among us, for the most part, I would say it's usually a mixture of expectation and awareness. Um, whether that's the famous interview with Robert Wagner, with the person who they got Omni through just constantly, maybe not constantly, but often throughout the day, thinking about where was I 15 minutes ago? What was going on 15 minutes ago? And just creating a sort of, grid pattern of check-ins. If you think about your day as a time continuum, and then you're checking in on a regular basis, you're checking into that awareness of like, where am I, what am I doing, and you do that continually, you're going to slowly incubate that into your dreams, right? It's going to slowly cross over. The effect of the awareness and the repetition of the action is going to cross over into the dreams in multiple ways. Not just in your experience of the dream, but also your mindset as you're dreaming. Just, it's you sleeping in a bed, having a dream. There's, you're not in your mind's off doing whatever, but it's still your brain, right? And it's still something that you can work with and condition. Um, so, I guess on the extreme end, a person that's totally confident and full of positivity, um, I don't really know like exactly what that would look like, because a person who's like that is going to make their own path right off the bat, and they're going to stay on their own path probably no matter what. And I remember somebody on the Dreamviews forum who they were really into shared dreaming, and they were convinced that it was real, and they were convinced that they were sharing dreams with other people, usually one person in particular, on a regular basis. And that was highly motivating for them. But they were just so confident that that's what was happening, and they believed it just so strongly that it didn't matter what they didn't really even do techniques. They just, they just believed it was real, and that experience was so motivating for them that it was like like a feedback loop of positivity and motivation. And that also, whether you believe shared dreaming is real or not, there was an element of delusion there as well. Just in the fact that you can't necessarily prove it, right? And so you don't really know if it's real. You don't really know, and spread it out broader to everything you do in lucid dreaming. Do you really know if it's working? Oh, well, I did this thing and I didn't get lucid tonight. That must mean it's not working. But maybe it is, and it just didn't work tonight, but it's going to work tomorrow night, or a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or whatever. And so there's this aspect of believing that it's going to work, or it's not even really believing that it's going to work. It's just believing in the process. It's believing in the process to the point where nothing really matters other than that process. I would call it delusional positivity. Delusional has kind of a negative connotation, right? And this is also, I also want to talk about like the flip side of this as well. But delusional has a bit of a negative connotation. You hear a lot about like the manifestation people, the law of attraction people. Create what you want to see in the world, all that stuff. And there's actually a lot of truth to it. What you dwell on in your mind tends to propagate itself. It's almost like one of the laws. I think it's the first or second law of thermodynamics. Like something that's in motion tends to stay in motion. And it's like once you start that momentum of a thought or a feeling, it starts slow and then it builds. And so if you start negative momentum, that's going to build. If you start positive momentum, that's going to build. And that's oftentimes how things work in our mind. So I think that's kind of the kind of summary of, all right, this is how confidence and positivity works with the others. This is how it could work on its own. And I'm going to pull up a little explainer that I have here from my Google Doc. And this is kind of the longer version of that little blurb. So I don't actually have a conceptual definition here because confidence is really tricky to describe. But the analogy is, this is the fuel and flavor that permeates all successful ventures into the unknown. It will take care of you while you are there and bring you home when the adventure has ended. This can also be seen as an expression of love. However, it is a love directed at oneself or into one's environment. This will be absorbed into every activity closely following and will greatly increase the chances of success. Alright, so that's probably sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, but I want to go a little bit deeper into that, and I want to start by pulling up a quote here by Carrie Fisher, and then also kind of contrasting it with expectation a little bit. And I really like this quote. It kind of stuck in my head as a great description because somebody on the Discord, and by the way, link the Discord in the description. And somebody on the Discord, Lunar, although I think she may have changed her name. But anyway, she was asking, like, what's the difference between expectation and confidence, or faith and confidence? Because I have faith under expectation, and it was a really good question. And when I saw this quote, like it kind of just expressed it perfectly for me. She says, "Stay afraid, but do it anyway. What's important is the action. You don't have to wait to be confident. Just do it. And eventually the confidence will follow." So I think, to me, what she's talking about here is actually faith. This is how I've heard faith described so many times. And in my mind, what she's really saying here is have faith in yourself. Have faith in yourself. Do it anyway, no matter how you feel. And the confidence will follow. And so oftentimes people think of confidence as a feeling, which it is, but it's also a mindset. And so it's maybe you don't even feel it, but you have it, and it's so strong that you don't need to feel it anymore. It's just normal. You know, I think a lot of people mistake the feeling of excitement, anticipation, and like this forward momentum, mixed with no fear, having no fear and being excited and ready for something, and they kind of mistake that for confidence. But I don't think it's actually a good idea to judge confidence through emotion. It's something deeper, and usually it comes with time. Usually it comes with repetition, and you just kind of know enough to know what's going to happen, and you know, and you may be taking a risk, but you have a certain level of confidence because of what you know and what you've experienced. And so I want to take a little bit of time to tease out what's the difference between this confidence and delusional positivity that I'm talking about, and expectation. Um, so uh, what I've got here is my 5 ways document, and I will be releasing this. I'm going to be fully fleshing it out, and there's also going to be a guide. I'll get more into that at the end of the video. So under expectation, I have that, these are foundational structures in our minds that create boundaries of experience. And part of expectation is the schema, which is the pattern. But another part of it is faith in oneself, and that's essentially, there's actually a verse in the Bible that describes it quite well, and it's translated, but so it's not the original, I'm sure, but it goes, faith is the expectation of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So it's a sort of, you're almost like, what I like to think of expectation as is you're remembering the future. And in other words, you're sort of bringing into reality something that doesn't exist. That's why people think faith is so delusional. And of course it's dangerous in that way, but it's also extremely powerful if you use it in a positive way. And this is how, that's kind of where the crossover is with the confidence, because you have that kind of delusional positivity. But the expectation itself is, I'm expecting something that isn't seen, that I don't actually know is going to happen or not, but I have faith. So I like to think in sports analogies a lot with these things. And I find sports fans have endless amounts of faith in their team. And, you have a variety of different sports fans, depending on who it is. And, maybe they're cynical and they're like, well, they're going to lose, but it's my team, so I'm going to watch them anyway. And then there's a lot of fans that they just keep the hope, right? They just keep that hope. And every year, no matter what kind of team they have, they're always hoping, even if they're down, they're, imagining all these outcomes where the team wins, right? And faith doesn't always work in your favor just because you believe and have faith in something. It doesn't mean that's going to happen. But oftentimes the actual act of having faith, um, and constructing that positive expectation in itself creates its own positive momentum, to where it allows you to adapt to failure. So there's a lot of actually science on this now, where people of faith are able to adapt to failure and trauma in a better way, a more healthy way than non-religious people. There's not really exact explanation for it, but in my opinion, it's because of this constant um, constant focus on expecting better things. And going back to confidence and positivity, that positive attitude, no matter the facts. So, uh, you know, you can interpret facts, you can have a bunch of negative facts, and that might be true. Things might be really bad, and that might be true. But you still have a choice how you're going to feel about it. And for a lot of people in terrible situations, that's almost like a cruel thing to say. Um, but let's kind of bring this back to lucid dreaming, um, where because we can get really into depth on that. It goes down a spiritual path, but psychological. And but in lucid dreaming, I see a lot of times when people fail, and then that gets baked in to their expectations, and then that produces a negative outlook. It destroys their confidence. It undermines their emotion, and it undermines their motivation and emotions. Um, and it just completely, um, it really makes any kind of exercise or attempted practice really ineffective. They're not able to fully exercise their abilities. So it's like a lot of times people say like they're in their own head. Okay. So, people might say, or they're overthinking, or they're in their own head, or they 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 played themselves, whatever. Um, you can't think about things too much. You can't focus on the failures too much. You want to focus on a failure enough to learn from it, but not so much that you start believing that that's all there is. If you start focusing on it too much, you're going to start believing that that's just the way things are, and that's just part of the deal. And in partly that it might be true, but it doesn't have to be true in the long term. And so if you focus on it too much, it's going to become true in the long term. And that's why the positive attitude is so important. And that's why now this next part, uh, knowing, that's also why this knowing is so important. Because and this is, I think, the hardest thing for people to do, is to know that it's going to work. Especially if they haven't had many lucids. Like, if I attempt to do something tonight, I know that I'm going to get a lucid dream. But do I really know? No, not really. I don't really know. Like, as in 100% confidence, like it's a fact. But I kind of know, right? Like, if I put in the amount of effort that I know from past experience gets me lucid dreams, I know I'm going to have a lucid dream tonight. Now, the question is, what's the cost of putting in that effort? What does that effort look like? And how does it fit into my life? It's another question. But how you get to that place where you actually know, I mean, a lot of it is just consistent practice. That's a lot of what it is. It's just doing it so many times that you just know what's going to happen. And that's where a lot of the confidence comes from, and that also creates a sort of feedback loop where you've done this enough times that you know it's going to happen, and then each time you do it right, you just get better and better and better. I don't know if you've ever done a skill-based job that requires repetitive action. A lot of times you just get better and better. One of my early jobs was at McDonald's, and working breakfast, you'd have these little egg rings, these metal egg rings, and you put that on the grill, and then you crack eggs onto it, right? And when somebody's training, they're doing like one egg at a time. By the time they get to the fourth egg, the first egg is already like cooked the quarter way through. And then you've got this other guy who's been working there for, maybe a year, and he's cracking 4 eggs at a time. He's got 2 eggs in one hand. He's got, 2 eggs in each hand. He's cracking 4 eggs at a time. He's got 2 of these things actually had eight rings, now that I'm remembering more correctly, or 6, whatever. Point being, after a while, he just got better and better. And there's a lot of min-maxing for gamers out there. It's like, how much can you do in the least amount of time? That was just part of it was like gamifying it. And just figuring out, okay, how good can I get? That was part of it. And those movements that he learned, how to hold 2 eggs without breaking them, how to crack the eggs just right and open them up to without dropping the shells in, like just the ability to do all of that without even thinking about it. It took him a lot of repetition to get to that point. Hundreds of times, literally, like hundreds of times. And so when you're thinking about lucid dreaming, you got to think in those terms. You can't, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking about lucid dreaming in very simplistic terms because they dream every night. I think that's part of it. Is like they dream every night. They figure they have full control over themselves. They have full control over their thoughts. I think a lot of people, and this is a thing with meditation teachers say a lot, that a lot of people simply assume that controlling their thoughts is easy and that they can do it. They can just control everything in their mind, and they're in control of themselves. Like, we all kind of have this belief that we're in control of ourselves. And when we feel out of control, we sort of get anxious and we get scared, and we tend to make poor decisions, or we reach out for coping mechanisms. And a lot of that is based on this belief that we should be in control and that we can control ourselves. And that if we're not in control and we can't control ourselves, something's wrong and something bad is going to happen. So this is natural for a child, but unfortunately, this is also something that, I mean, a huge portion of the population at any age, it's kind of a natural thing just being an animal and living in the universe. But unfortunately, a lot of people haven't really learned how to adapt and live with that. And so a lot of people would prefer to delve into coping mechanisms, myself included, right? Rather than um, actually confront and allow oneself to be out of control. And a lot of time, how a lot of times it takes a really strong positive attitude to maintain that trust in something. You need trust in something or faith in something. You need some kind of foundation a lot of times. Um, so I think that kind of almost compulsive um, need to control that all humans have, it really undermines this confidence and knowing, this positive attitude. A lot of people just say go with the flow, right? And there's a lot to be said for that. And be in the moment, you know. So so we've talked about how confidence fits into the 5 ways, how it's a little bit different than expectation, how the difference between that and faith. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the 5 ways back on the screen here. So the question is, how do we actually put this into practice? On my document, I have subtype in action, consistent practice. And then with knowing, let's bring that back up for a second. With knowing, I've got no questioning. So let's dive into this now. So how do we actually put this into practice? I mean, and this is tricky because it's not necessary, like everybody's mileage is going to vary. Depending on your particular mindset at any given time, you're going to have a different experience. And I've seen people in the Discord where they're like, well, I've been doing this for like a month and nothing is happening. And it's like they keep doing the same thing. And you talk to it like, okay, well, what's going on? What are you doing? And everything that they say is, well, this didn't work. That didn't work. This didn't work. That didn't work. And that's fair, right? It's like, okay, what you're trying isn't working. You're trying to figure out what does work, and you're trying so you can do that, so it can work. But the question in lucid dreaming is not about the important question is not what works. The important question is, what did you learn from what you did? So what did work about what you did? So, and then, in this, I've talked about this in previous videos. Most of the time, people do not see the successes. And there is just not, there is just an extreme lack of positivity. And I think a lot of that has to do with being kind of sold by a lot of content creators, sold on a lie. The lie that anybody will have a lucid dream tonight. It's possible, but there's a lot of false expectations. set up to make lucid dream look easy. Now, it's tricky because you don't want people to believe that it's hard, because that will make it hard. But if you say that it's easy, that will make people believe it's easy, and then when it's not easy, it's almost even worse. So I don't know which one's worse, honestly. It's basically impossible to set proper expectations for people before knowing what they've done and and even then it's difficult because you can't get inside their head. You don't know what their attitude is like and how they're responding to things and what they're seeing. The big question is, are you able to see your successes? Because if you're able to see your successes, you're going to be able to build a positive attitude. Um, if you can only see your failures, you're never going to have a positive attitude. You're going to be like, "Oh man, that didn't work. Well, I'll try something else. Oh man, that didn't work. Oh, I'll try something else." And you'll just be stuck in that cycle. And even if something does work, you'll be like, "Well, I don't know why it worked." And then it may not work again, and you'll be like, "Well, I guess it didn't work because, I don't know." Um, a lot of that is just being kind of stuck in the wrong mindset because you're not looking for successes. So, and what do I mean by this? So, when you're talking about lucid dreaming, one of the first things that, especially on the Discord, people will say to you is dream journal and reality check. Okay. So what are those two things? Those two things are get more familiar with your dreams, become more aware of them, work on your memory of them, right? Mental practice, kind of bringing your dreams closer to you, in a sense. And reality checking, self-reflection. It's becoming more aware of your day, of yourself during the daytime, and working on this skill of self-reflection, and working on the skill of perspective memory, remembering to do something. Because if you can remember to do something, you can remember that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. Lucid dreaming is meta, right? Like we're talking about remembering to remember, that that you're dreaming in a dream. It's all very meta. But so we say, okay, yeah, dream journal, reality check. And so in those two things, every exercise, every technique will have some measure of success. If you're trying wild, wake initiate a lucid dream, and it doesn't work for the 20th time, but question, have you learned anything about how you fall asleep? If you have learned anything about it, if you can tell me experiences that you had while falling asleep, like, oh, well, I couldn't hear anything anymore, or yeah, I couldn't really feel my body anymore. Like, those are successes. That's learning. Oh, I experienced some hypnagogia. That's a success. When I attempted wild, I had better recall. That's a success. Um, if you're doing mild and you're like, well, I tried it, but it didn't work. It's like, well, did you visualize the dream? Yes. And was your visualization better than last time? If it was, that's a success. Were you able to focus on becoming lucid in your visualization more than last time? That's a success. So instead of only looking at becoming lucid as a success, it is so important, like beyond important for positivity and confidence, to see every little improvement as a success. So instead of saying, oh, I didn't get lucid, I failed. No. You didn't fail. You're actually, that's actually in the root of it. You're trying to control everything, and you're expecting that if you just do this thing, then this other thing will happen because you're in control of it. But you're not in control of it. You're not in control of the dream whatsoever. You're working with the dream. You're working with yourself. You're changing yourself in order to change the dream. Okay. It's one of the, somebody's probably thinking of the Matrix. You have to realize that it's not the spoon that's changing, it's you. When you start to realize that, you'll start to realize that you're not actually in control. You're just figuring out how to adapt. You're figuring out how to work with, how to navigate. Okay. That's why I really like this exploration analogy that I use, like a ship on an ocean, whatever. Because you're figuring out how to work with. You're like, okay, that's the ocean. I can swim, but if I was in a boat, I could be dry. And if I had a big boat, I could live on the boat as I cross the water. Like, instead of just saying, oh, I'm just going to swim, I can control this. I can just swim across. Number one, you're not controlling Jack. You're totally at the mercy of the ocean, even more so when you're trying to take it into your own hands. Um, you know, like the ocean is always going to win, no matter what. No how, in my opinion, no matter how powerful humans become, nature and the universe will always win. Um, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's where we are right now. That's where we have been for ever. No reason for it to change. Point being, you can build better and better boats, but you still need to account for the fact that the ocean is in control. The sea makes the rules, and you have to live by those rules. And you can see your lack of ability to control the sea as a failure, or you can look at how you're, how am I controlling the boat? And am I getting better at that? Am I getting better at controlling the boat? Am I building maybe I get an improvement, you can stretch that metaphor quite a ways. It's about, I'm going to practice consistently, and I'm going to find my successes, and then I'm going to build on those successes. Okay. So I'm going to experiment, I'm going to find things that work, and I'm going to improve on those things. And again, this tends to be a pretty personal process, because when you get into the mind, it's usually very hard to describe to others what's going on, and it's hard to look into somebody else's mind to know what's going on, even if they're trying to describe it to you. And so a lot of this stuff, we can help on the Discord and talk about it, but a lot of times it's up to the individual to figure it out. And that's really what this whole entire 5 ways thing is about, is helping people understand how it works so that they can figure it out on their own. Because just having a technique and having somebody explain and say, you do A, B, C, D, I mean, okay, but that in itself, I think a technique, just having a technique in itself is basically saying, do this and you'll get a lucid dream. But that's not the way it works. And so then you've got people that, I've been doing mild for 3 months and it doesn't work. It's like, that's because the technique's not meant to work. It's, it doesn't make sense, right? The technique is just something that people have found works, and it just so happens that it worked for a lot of people or a certain number of people. and then, people are like, oh, this works. But that doesn't mean it's going to work. Now, mild, that Stephen LaBerge developed, is the most widely accepted technique because it works for the most amount of people. But that doesn't mean it works for everybody. And if there was a technique that could work immediately for everybody, everybody would be doing it. We would know about it. Okay, so that's kind of the main point. How do you apply that positive attitude to your lucid dreaming? Consistent practice and finding your successes. Okay. Now, what about the knowing part? And where I say no questioning. Okay. Now, I'm going to go a little bit of personal story time for about 5 minutes on this and explain this, and then we're going to go into the wrap up. Now, knowing and the no questioning, because of how I grew up and my psychology, when I was young, I was very observant, and I kind of stood back and observed. And then when I kind of matured into adulthood, I became very questioning. I would question everything, and I grew up in a environment where there was no questioning almost of anything, of the authorities, of the beliefs, of the faith, and so that is an extremely toxic environment, right? So why am I saying no questioning? That sounds kind of like that's not good, right? Well, in some ways, you would have a point, and questioning oftentimes is good. But there is a certain point where questioning actually becomes counterproductive. If you're always asking questions, you're never going to have enough time to build something. If you're going to try to build something and you're just spending all of your time planning and asking questions, you're never going to get anything done. So there's always a balance there. But there's a bigger point here. And for years and years I was questioning everything and trying to figure it out, whatever it may be, right? Trying to figure it out. And there was no real answers. It was just all questions. And you just, find your own path and, let the questions take you where it will. And you may have you're here right now, but tomorrow something may come up and everything changes, right? Of course, when you look at the patterns of your life and your habits, it turns out that being in that mindset often takes you to the path of least resistance and takes you away from difficulty and planting a flag and really deciding to commit to something. You end up having a really hard time committing to a specific course. And so what does that do to you psychologically? Well, it creates instability. It creates, which in turn creates anxiety. You know, we have, and I think compulsive questioning is another kind of control response, trying to control everything and analyzing every little thing. And that's the assumption. Again, that's based on this assumption that we can control everything and that we are in control. But we're not. This is so important. We are not in control. There's been studies done where it shows that the conscious mind, what we see as how we control things, we're thinking about things, we're analyzing things, we're deciding, we're creating all these puzzles and seeing the world, right? Well, The unconscious mind is many, 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 many times more powerful, more complex, faster than our conscious mind. So much so that some determinists have decided that we don't actually have free will because supposedly the decision has been made before we consciously realize the decision has been made. That gets into kind of free will and some other stuff, but um, the point being is we think we're in control, and we want to question everything so that we can map everything out so that we can have the best answer possible and make the best decisions possible. And in reality, we're just compulsively anxious about every single possible failure. And we're going to try to avoid every single possible failure by questioning everything. Okay? And what I found after a while was people would question me. They would question my approach. And immediately I would go into self-analysis mode, and I would try to come up with a justification. Even though in lucid dreaming, I mean, and life in general, a lot of times there is no perfect answer. There is no like equation for why you're going to do something or why you prefer to do it this way or why it worked. You know, people that have success, like, well, how did you become successful? How did this work? And they usually come up with an answer that we've heard thousands of times from other people that doesn't really mean much. You know, it's like, well, stay motivated, or, you know, consistency, like, you know, it's and very unsatisfying answers, right? And so um, what I found was people would question, and I would just not have a good enough answer, which to me was like, well, if I don't have a good enough answer, then what am I doing? And that would turn into a loop of questioning of like, well, am I doing the right thing? What should I be doing? Is this actually working? And if you default to that on a regular basis, then you're not going to be able to build this mindset of knowing that it's going to work, because you're always going to be questioning if it's going to work or what works in the first place. I used to have, debilitating nightmares into my, late 20s, and I self-medicated, which hurt my dream practice, and I wanted to believe that I could go in there lucidly and control the negativity and take over and everything, especially since when I was a kid, I learned how lucid dream and I was really good at it. And so not having that as an adult was like really discouraging. And I would always question, like, oh man, I don't think I can do this. I mean, now, I'm going to have those nightmares. I know I'm going to have them. And I'm going to have to deal with them one at a time as they come. And I don't know how I'm going to deal with them in the moment, but I'm going to do something. I don't know if I'm going to be able to control them fully. Maybe I might have to let them do what they're going to do. Maybe I'm going to have to experience them as they are. And it's just going to have to be that way. And I'm just going to have to endure. That is painful sometimes, and depending on what you're going through. But in general, for most people, I think it's just like anxiety producing, and there's no answers, and what am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that? Like, that you're not giving me any advice, you're just telling me that life sucks and deal with it. And which, that's kind of the way it is. So what, again, back to no questioning. I'm not going to question anything. I'm just going to trust in the process. I'm just going to practice, and I'm going to trust in the practice. I'm going to trust that the practice works. I'm just going to focus on that. I'm not even going to think about anything else. I'm not going to ask any questions. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what questions they have. I don't care what they think about what I'm doing. I'm just going to focus on my practice. And if you ask me why I'm doing or what I'm doing, I'm not going to have an answer for you, because none of that frickin' matters. Okay? What matters is that I practice and that I succeed in the little things. And is it working? Yes, it works for me. Why does it work? I don't know. And even if I came up with an answer, it wouldn't be good enough for you. Like, you're just going to ask me another question. It's like, well, it works because of this. Okay, well, why does that work? Well, it works because of this. Well, why does that work? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, then what's the point? Like, we are so wired to want every little loose end tied up to control every little freaking thing. And if it's not controlled, then we freak out and it unravels the entire puzzle. And it's like, just chill out and accept the fact that you're going to fail. And the only thing that you can do is do something. And you're just gonna have to ride that anxiety out. That's just the way it is. And that's how you get to the knowing. So, um, and that kind of brings me back to the Carrie Fisher quote, which is stay afraid. Like, stay afraid, but do it anyway. Okay. You don't have to wait to be confident. In fact, if you do wait to be confident, you're going to be waiting for a long time. Okay. Maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. But if you go and do something, do a little exposure therapy, right? Eventually the confidence will follow. All right. So that is confidence. That is the fifth way, confidence. And like I said in past videos, all of these ways tie in together. They will, each one of them, improve your practice, but they can also be used by themselves and focused on obsessively as their own way. You don't have to create the perfect practice. You can go with what works for you and, see what happens. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to talk a little bit about the plans that I have, and then I'm going to log off here. So the 5 ways is a series that I put together based on some learnings that I got from um, lucid dreaming in my childhood. I saved the lessons I got from a dream guide, and then I transcribed them, or kind of reimagined them in a way into a conceptual structure back maybe like 12 years ago. And then I kind of just let it ruminate and kind of bake in the oven for a while before writing it out and starting to work on it as a video series. So a lot of it is ideas in my head that haven't been put onto paper yet. So I have a sort of rough outline in a Google Doc, but I am also going to build a guide. And the guide is not going to be techniques, although it will include techniques. It's not going to be exercises, although it will include exercises. What it's going to be is a roadmap to build your own practice. Everybody knows the basics like dream journal, reality check, techniques, but how do you actually fit that into your life? How do they actually work? How does it actually work for you? And based on how it has worked, how do you need to adapt to make them work better? That's what the 5 ways are all about. So it's about enabling somebody new to build a practice and enabling experienced lucid dreamers to improve their practice. And, you know, if you got like a weak spot, you can say, okay, you go through all the aspects of awareness. Am I good on all those? Maybe I'm missing part of something in awareness, or maybe I'm missing something in motivation. And you can start to practice certain things that I will recommend to work on those particular aspects. So, on the one hand, it's almost like a diagnostic system, like what's the problem? Is there a problem? And how to fix it. And on the other hand, it's also a practice structure building tool. So I've released all of the videos of all the 5 ways. I had an overview as the first video, and then I went through each of the 5 ways one by one. Then the next installment, and the last installment, is going to be the guide and how to use it. So if you're still watching, thank you for watching and hope to see you on the next one.